Good afternoon. My name is Laurel Toyofuku, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to Lincoln Center Activate for today's Developing Arts-Based Digital Content session. To describe myself and my surroundings, I'm an Asian woman, have light-colored skin, brown shoulder-length hair, and I'm wearing a long-sleeved black shirt. I'm sitting in front of a white wall and a wooden bookcase. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Please note that this session is being live captioned and is available in English, French, Mandarin, and Spanish, along with text manipulation tools for those with low vision. The link to access these features is in the chat. Your microphones will be muted, but feel free to ask us questions and engage with other participants using the chat feature. My colleague Dan will be moderating and happy to help. Make sure you stick around because we'll be offering exclusive early access to former Alvin Ailey dancer and choreographer Hope Boykin's July Activate keynote. Stay tuned for the link following tonight's workshop. And don't forget to join the Lincoln Center Activate Facebook group to connect with other participants and continue the conversation after the conclusion of today's session. Now, please welcome John Holyoke, Lincoln Center Education's lead instructional specialist.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here with us. And I am John Holyoke. To give you a sense of my appearance, I'm a white middle-aged man with brown hair, just starting to want for another haircut. I've got a white shirt and a gray cardigan, and I'm in front of a white wall with a poster of a cartoon child in a yellow smock. And I've got a dining room table in front of that. I am thrilled to be here with my colleague, Ashley Renee Watkins. Ashley and I have worked closely together on pop-up classrooms, and we'll be hosting this session together today. So Ashley, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Renee Watkins, short version Ashley Renee. I am a Black woman. I am wearing a red shirt. I have moderately big, somewhat curly hair, and I'm sitting in front of a sort of off-white or eggshell wall with some polka dot pillows behind me. And I'm so excited to be here with you today.
So
okay, yeah, go ahead.
Tonight's event is in two parts. And the second part is going to have a lab format. We're going to dive into lessons by 3 different educators from around the country who are joining us today, which we're also very excited about. So we'll have a chance to talk about their work together, and we'll probably even experiment and try a few things out with them live. But before that, we wanted to tell you about our experience making Pop-Up Classroom this year. So Pop-Up Classrooms are a series of online lessons conducted by Lincoln Center teaching artists such as Ashley. And we're going to share the story of how they came to be first, the things we tried, things we learned, and some of the adjustments that we're making even still up to today, things we're exploring even today. So we hope that story will then be a reference point for the work we'll do after. So this presentation, and I'm now going to switch over to PowerPoint, it'll be about 35 minutes, and then we'll answer a couple of questions after that, and then we'll move into the workshop portion of our time. And each one of those workshop segments will have about 20 minutes with each of our guests. So let me share my screen. I'm just going to check and make sure that everybody can see that first slide. Can I get a thumbs up? Ashley, do you see that? Very good. Okay, great. So we're going to make this full deck available to everybody. So if we, there's quite a bit of info in it, we might skim over parts of it. If we do jump over parts here, you'll have a chance to look at them later. There's probably a little bit more than you'd want to take in all at once anyway. So let's see. I think we are ready to start off. Ashley, I'm going to turn it over to you to start us off.
Thank you, John. So as John said, there's going to be quite a bit of information on each of these slides. So we won't go through all of them due to information overload. So I'm just going to first set the scene a little bit since we're in the storytelling mode, and sort of raise some of these things that were uniquely challenging to us at Lincoln Center Education. So we know that in March, we all found ourselves in this sort of unprecedented shutdown situation. And all of these circumstances that we see in front of us, COVID, quarantine, schools closing down, were all sort of present issues. But what was uniquely challenging for Lincoln Center specifically was the idea that we as teaching artists, our model is built around this work of art. And in this sort of new space that we found ourselves, we no longer had access and clearance to those work of art, or they just didn't exist in a digital format just yet. So that moves us into this idea of what the challenges presented with these sort of unique circumstances that we were facing. So in thinking about challenges, there were immediate conversations about how do we adjust? How do we pivot? How do we rethink what we do and how we do it and where we do it? So one of the main things that we're seeing in our challenges is that we are an inquiry-based institution. So questioning is a pivotal thing for us. Work of arts, we question around the work of arts and we question around that kind of process. So how do we now streamline that idea of inquiry and start to pivot into thinking about the teaching artist and what is afforded to the teaching artist in order to keep this work going in this new iteration that we're now thinking about that eventually was called pop-up. So that made us think about the medium that we wanted to move to. There are several sort of digital or virtual offering platforms, but there was one only platform that really could offer us the possibility of tracking data, researching the work that we were doing. And so therefore, Facebook became the platform that we used. And then this first sort of version of the pop-up classroom, we found ourselves in a Facebook live classroom now in teaching artists' homes. There were some limitations to that in that all of the interaction, if we're inquiry-based kind of practice, that means there's a lot of exchange that needs to happen. So we found ourselves now having to do that exchange through a 45-second delay as a facilitator for a teaching artist, and only being able to get responses through chat. So we had to get really inventive, and we'll talk about how we got really inventive with that chat a little bit later. And another component that I really want to raise in this is that vigorous rights vetting that came out of this. You know, Facebook's algorithms are, they're on it. So if it's anything that's copywritten, it will eventually flag it. We actually had a video of mine that got flagged. I was using my own music, but it was through the Facebook, the Lincoln Center Facebook account. And so it even flagged it. So we really had to think about, now we're really shifting from this work of art model to this teaching artistry and really focusing on the artistry kind of model. So I'm going to turn back over to John, who's going to talk to us a little bit about those shifts.
Exactly, because we couldn't wait to get the rights to works of art.
Oh, wait, John, I think you're on mute.
Oh, am I on mute? Here I am on mute. Let me see. Can you hear me now?
Nope, still can't.
Hear me? Can you hear me now? You got me? You can hear me. Okay. Stop me if you don't hear me. I'm assuming now you hear me. Right. So that involves some shifts for us. We had to shift. We had to move from the first question we thought to ask when sheltering began, which was, how can we move what we have been doing, our programs, our units, the institutions we partner with, online? Two other questions. Number one, how can we engage young people directly, including the young people we've been working with before? What does this online medium allow us to do effectively? How can we realize something that works on that medium, but that then also corresponds to our pedagogical values? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what had to shift for us, what changed and what remained constant, and what we've arrived at thus far. But one of the big takeaways for us, and hopefully for you today, was that step back itself. It was backing up from the question, how can we do what we have always done, but on the net, to how does the net and what we do best combine? So these bullets kind of break that down a little bit. So in classrooms, we do everything that we can at Lincoln Center to work as facilitators. The TA works to get out of the way, models emerge from students. Here, we had to model not only the process, but also the exploratory spirit. Again, TAs were engaged as the instructor, but then also kind of like as the student, thinking out loud. In classrooms, we're shifting from the TA as a visitor coming into the classroom and the student space to hosting the students in our space or meeting them in a kind of hybrid home space. Now, we love open questions at Lincoln Center, like Ashley Renee said. They're a signature characteristic, and now we're on a medium where those same questions won't work. It'll take a live stream viewer 3 minutes to type an answer to a question like, what might this mean to you? And you can't stand around on screen waiting for an answer. So we needed to find a way to create the same current of inquiry and participation for shorter answers. And finally, video is a fundamentally performative medium. If you go in exactly like you are as a teacher in a classroom, it won't work. On the other hand, if you work only as a performer, we found that, well, that too wouldn't work. So teaching and performing had to find a balance, and we'll talk about that later. So that's what shifted. And, we've tried some things, continued into this digital platform. Here's some of what we discovered. So first, design principles emerged that helped us guide creative design. Pop-up lessons involve making first and foremost. Audience and host, they're creating something. And that involves steps that build up to a finished product of some kind. And that making is active. That is, for most of the episodes, until we undertook a challenge of shorter ones, we were assuming that the audience is creating with or alongside the artist. They're not passively watching the artist make something so that maybe then later on, they'll make something. And they are exploratory. So they do include questions, and wondering is modeled as an integral part of the choice making. Finally, a design principle that really floated up to the top is they should be fun. There are a lot of ways to get to fun, and we'll talk about that as we go. But for now, I'm going to say that fun doesn't need to be accomplished with diversion. We work on the assumption that deep engagement in a process is fun. So a distinct structure also emerged for pop-up episodes. We were generating 4 or 5 of these a week. And so some structure regularity made it easier when we were working at that clip, and also easier to recognize if you were a returning audience. Now, this right here, we're going to provide to you in a PDF form. So I won't go into the detail, but just glancing, you can see the modularity. Each one has warm up, there's the art making, and then there's an invitation, for instance, at the end to go further. So they had a distinctive look and feel and a flow. Also, when you're producing many regularly, you have to find a cadence. And we arrived at a production timeline. In other words, what steps are necessary to best assure that each episode is going to be good? And how long does that take? So we think that the stages that are listed here in this slide we really found that they're necessary to arrive at something good: brainstorming, scripting, rehearsal, re-recording if you're actually on recording. To do a live broadcast, it took us about a week and a half, and really to get through to a pre-record takes about overall 3 weeks. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ashley.
Yes. So this was a very sort of diverse word to use, accessibility, in the way that we sort of all approach this. I think for most of myself and my colleagues, we were really just trying to think of as many possible ways in. And that's something that has carried over from our work in traditional classrooms or land-based settings, as they call them now. But each teaching artist was trying to think of how to create an accessible way into the work that we were, or into the process that we were taking participants through. So that came through the idea of, in movement, how do we create opportunities for participants to do a move standing or sitting, or use an alternative body part or something like that, to really get into how do we make this accessible. It also came in some of those classroom sort of staples. How do we incorporate things like universal design into this work? How do we create access to make things visible on screen as we're talking about them, and create those supports for multiple learning styles, whether you be visual, audio, or some combination of them. So one of the interesting things that came out for some of my work in particular was John and I grappled with this idea of how do we create a multilingual way in, but from the sense of using words, symbols, emojis, and acknowledging that if we're limited to something like a chat, in this first iteration, then how do we create as many possibilities for participants to do those things of soliciting their engagement, and also offering ideas in order to contribute to this artistic process that was unfolding in front of them. And we really wanted to give opportunities for participants to have ownership of this, and really go through thinking like an artist with us, even in this medium. So with that, we transitioned into this idea of realizing that in order to step into this new sort of way of facilitating as TAs, we really had to honor and lean into this idea of persona, of having some performative elements to it while teaching, for the purposes of drawing people in with our sense of authenticity and this genuineness, which John will talk about the genuineness in a little bit. We'll zero in on the authenticity piece, but I believe we're about to watch a video, and I just want to frame it as this is when we started to move from the live component, or the live approach, into the pre-recording. This is a video that I did around ornamentation in music. It's about a 9-minute pop-up video, and we'll just watch a little bit of it and then talk about that authenticity piece around it.
Let it shine, let it shine. Welcome. My name is Miss Ashley, and I'm from Lincoln Center. Today, we'll be making some choices with our voices, doing something called ornamenting. If you like wearing jewelry or decorating your walls, ornamenting is like that. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ah, isn't that song great already? And isn't it so important for us to let our light shine? So I did a little run on this and then a little grace note on light. So did you notice for the melody that I had to change it a little bit? That's totally normal. So it's kind of like when you're in a crowded room and someone wants to get in, everybody has to sort of move around a little bit to make space for that new person to come in. Well, ornaments kind of make us do that with a melody. So what happens if we change one of those ornaments that we just heard? And instead of on light, what if we put our grace note on mine? Let's leave our run on this and then try out this new grace note on mine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I had so much fun ornamenting with you. I'm Miss Ashley from Lincoln Center. Remember to make choices with your voice today.
That's not awkward to watch yourself at all. I'm sure anyone that's here making these kinds of content is like, I gotta watch myself do this, but you do. So I wanted to sort of zero in on this idea of authenticity because it's something that I feel, and John and I were talking about this, kind of lives in ambiguity a little bit of how do you come from an authentic space in this particular work. And we sort of identified these sort of areas that you see in front of you. And in the earlier conversations about pop-up classrooms, it came this idea of teaching artists operating from their wheelhouse. What do we know how to do as artists? What do we love as artists? What do we love about the art that we do? And how can we sort of open up a process and create some access into that work from a place of things that we enjoy about our art and our art form? So that really opened up the possibilities of what we would even be teaching about. So it wasn't just sort of limited to now not a work of art, but what are the elements of music that I just love so much and I just want to like make people aware of? These are things that we encounter in our lives, our everyday lives. You hear something like an ornamentation, it's in all music. So how do we start to give a name to that and empower people to experiment with it, play with it, make it become a tangible tool for them? So that sort of that idea of authenticity, of guiding people in choice making was really a key element in determining the content of the pop-up classrooms and really how you could have a pop-up classroom that would kind of like connect to one to the other. There was almost some series that started to get birthed out of it. I know a lot of our colleagues and myself started to develop consistent things from one video to the other. Consistent, almost character-like presences, or in my case, a consistent catchphrase that kind of gave birth. And it came from coming of a place of knowing sort of your intentions as a teaching artist, whether in the virtual world or in this sort of in the in-classroom world. Knowing your intentions and then what it is that you want to sort of open up to others. So John's going to show us some more of our colleagues and kind of frame it from this second piece around genuine.
Great. Yep. And I'll add that actually part of the wheelhouse for many of our teaching artists, is working with a work of art. And so we did begin to reintroduce works of art, especially because it belongs in the wheelhouse of some of our teaching artists. But yeah, so if authenticity is an ingredient and the balance between performer and facilitator is big, then, the quality of that persona is going to be different with each teaching artist. So in a minute, I'm going to show you a range of different pop-up episodes and some different TAs working. But before I do, I want to point out a couple of other aspects of facilitation so you can note them across the episodes. So there's fun again. And the point to make there is just that the more the teaching artist seems genuinely absorbed in the project and in the moment and delighted by the choices they're making, the more fun it is. We found that we were actually encouraging moments and situations where the TAs could surprise themselves in some way. If it's genuine, it's pretty fun to see a teaching artist or an instructor delighted by what happens and even entertain themselves. That could be embracing little mistakes. It could be do-it-yourself solutions to technical problems. In the early days of sheltering in place, that was a bonding point for everybody who was stuck at home. So fun hacks for visual effects, or it could be just moments of spontaneous experience or decision-making. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about, bring to your attention before we look. And that's that the teaching artist is in a room. They're in a space. And so 2 things about space to watch for. In general, we're trying to draw viewers into the space to welcome them in rather than projecting out into their space, number 1. And number 2, that space has heightened properties like a stage does. So when you watch for the ways the TAs work things when they're close to the camera, when they're midway, and when they're back from the camera. So we've now seen Ashley in action. Let's see some other teaching artists at work. If you notice anything about these other than what I've said, there's plenty to notice. You can add it in the chat, but let's go ahead and take a look at some other teaching artists in pop-up.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. My name is Mr. B, and I'm a theater teaching artist at Lincoln Center, and today we are going to start at the beginning.
Hello, good to see you all again. My name is Barbara Ellman, and welcome to Lincoln Center's pop-up classroom.
First, we're going to identify parts of the stage. Then we're going to create our own stage in our homes and play a little stage tic-tac-toe. Next, we are going to really get into the definition of stage balance. And then finally, we're going to explore stage balance through our Stage Balance Challenge, using a script of a story that you may be familiar with. So I hope you stick around. Well, it seems like we got our agenda done, so let's get started with our first activity.
So now we're going to do a sketch of the mask that you would like to make today. And I'm going to just talk you through it. You're going to need your marker and you're going to need your white piece of paper. So the first thing that I would like you to do, and this is going to be rather quick, I'd like you to just make an outline, picking one of the shapes perhaps, or your own other shape. I'd like you to make an outline of what you can imagine the outside of the head's going to be. Is it going to be round like sort of human heads? Is it going to be square like a robot? Is it going to be triangular? Is it going to be long, like a long rectangle? You decide and just draw that first.
Everyone do a quiet shape. Quieter. Loud shape. Be careful, watch out, I see you, chair. Keep your toes safe. Keep your loud shape. All right, what are some other ones we can play with here? Ooh, frozen and melted. Mary, I love that. Everyone first. And then, let's go ahead and melt. Grace, just your hand.
And now it is time for us to build. We're going to start to put these together. So I have a really cool thing to show you guys. Do not laugh at my drawing. I'm not a visual artist necessarily, even though I do like to draw, but I'm not Picasso, okay? So I like them so much, I just couldn't decide which one I wanted to do. So let's just do both, okay? So here's my little drawing, guys. So these are our step combinations for today.
Okay. How did it go? I'm sweating, but I'm also really happy. That dance made me really happy. I might just put that in my back pocket for, rainy days, if you know what I mean. Okay, so this is not the end. there's always next steps. There's always more that you can do. So if you had a year and $1 million, a whole year and $1 million, we could keep adding opposites, right?
Oh my goodness. Well, I did not even see you there. Look at that. Ooh. 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 Barbara Properbox. Barbara Properbox. Barbara Properbox. Barbara. Another one.
Under, over, stomp, over, under, over, stomp, over. My turn. Your turn. My turn. Your turn. My turn. Your turn. My turn. Your turn.
Oh, by the way, I want to do something really cool. There's this tree over here, and it actually looks like a taco. A taco? You're kidding. And scene. And that would be my story of Grumblmouth and Sam and Corky. I hope you had fun today. I had the best time ever. I'm Mr. B. Go out, play, make a traveling theater, create a story, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Whoop. Let me bring you back here. One moment. All right. I think I've got you back. Okay, so we're going to reference back to those, some of what we just saw, those classrooms later on with our teaching artists. So I'm going to move on and we'll come back to those, I'm sure, when we're working in just a bit. So we tried some adjustments and changes as we went along, based in part on what Facebook data could provide. I'm going to just pull out a couple of things, but here is a few of the things that we learned. Though we usually had enough participants in our live sessions to interact with and get feedback from and ideas from, it proved to be a small fraction of those who participated in classes overall. 1. 2, shorter does not necessarily equal better engagement. Now, that actually runs counter to what some feel or find in the field, but you'll see in the chart below these two that there is not a correlation between the shorter length of views and sharing or retention, how long they stay. In fact, the longer episodes here seem more correlated with viewership. Now, we don't infer that longer equals better. We do infer that sound, well-built sequencing of steps is engaging. So we don't feel like you have to do something 10 minutes long to find viewers. You can, and we did, but you don't have to. The chart above is interesting just to note. Audiences that you don't expect sometimes show up. There's an age demographic. This is an age demographic from a dance episode about line dancing. We see the audience we expected, which is adults late 30s, 40s, which we infer to be parents of elementary school students. We don't know. But ultimately, the audience that really showed up in force was women 65 years and older. So that has us thinking about how our episodes might flex for different audiences. So we made some changes based on that. And the big change that I would want to touch on is that we moved from live to pre-record. And why did we do that? Well, number one, it allowed us to increase the quality of it, which you could probably see. We were sharing you some from at different points in time. Greater graphics, more graphics allowed our episodes to be more accessible to different kinds of learners. We were able to eliminate dropped streams, which we had a few of those, which we were not comfortable with. And also, having gotten there, we were able to experiment with little bits of fast forward and also opportunities to pause, which would allow participants to stay apace with more complex projects. Because we learned that cross-posting drew in more viewers, we pursued partnerships. We have one with WNET. We created some short episodes for a camp TV show this summer. And right now we're on their All Arts website. So speaking of that, I would like to actually wind down, end with one more viewing. So sometimes we go back, on occasion, we will go back to an idea, something we did early on. And in this instance here, what I want to share with you is an episode hosted and designed by Taran Matusik, teaching artist Taran Matusik. This workshop, the first thing you're going to see was the second day of pop-up. So we're back late March. And she's the second one up to go. And then we revisited that and reworked it in August. So this will give you an idea of some of the differences that I just mentioned and some of the evolution that we've discussed. And we'll wind down with that. So Jesse, when you have a check at those.
Good morning. Welcome to the Lincoln Center pop-up classroom. You finished this strip? All right. My name is Ms. T, and today we'll be working on a lesson with lined space and paper weaving. When I opened some of these envelopes, I saw these patterns. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? That is absolutely delightful. It's blue. It's fancy. I've got a green one here. 2 parts to weaving. We've got the warp and we've got the weft. Whoops, let's see. Weft. It doesn't have to be like all so fancy and perfect. The inside has to be a little fancy and perfect because these paper, the weft is going to go in between, so a nice smooth edge is going across. I'm going to make a super wiggly line inspired by my drawings. So I'm bringing them back over here. This right here, see how long it is? Woo! This is all envelopes. It's envelope connected to envelope, connected to envelope, connected to envelope. Just making my work longer by slipping strips underneath my strips. I hope that you will share your discoveries, your weavings, with the hashtag Lincoln Center at Home.
Welcome everyone. My name is Taran and I'm from Lincoln Center. Today we will be exploring 3-dimensional paper weaving. For this project, you will need paper. You can use new paper, or you could repurpose paper for our project. When something is flat, we call that 2-dimensional. When something pops up into space, we call that 3-dimensional. 2D is flat, 3D pops up. We're gonna be working on 3D. So now I need my paper strips to weave across it for my weft. I'm going to use a piece of treasure mail. This is not junk mail. It's so great. On the inside, there's really pretty color and a really neat pattern. I'm going to continue weaving all the way down to the bottom of my warp, so that I end up like this. Twist and loop. What other materials could you use for your paper weaving? Are there some that you could explore that aren't even paper? There are so many possibilities. So gather your materials, cut your warp, weave your materials together, and see what happens.
I love watching those. So that is the story of Pop-Up Classroom. And before we move on into our next segment, and before we entertain any questions you might have, we can probably toss a couple around before we jump in. I want to introduce a key player in Pop-Up Classroom to the screen. So Jesse Itzkwitz is going to step onto the panel. Our colleague Jesse is the mastermind and wizard behind all of the tech components. He helped set up the TAs in their space, which he did remotely through the mail and on the phone. And he set the look for editing, and he generally helped drive the transformation to the more polished look that you just saw now. So Jesse, I'll let you say hello.
Hello, hello. Being the so-called tech wizard does not keep me from forgetting to unmute myself. But here we are. Hi, I'm Jesse Itzkwitz. I'm the production supervisor for Lincoln Center Education. To describe myself really briefly, I am a white man wearing a green shirt and a maroon vest. I have glasses, a beard, and my hair is pulled back into a COVID ponytail. And I am sitting in the Clark Studio Theater, which used to be my home away from home, but now I get to be here very infrequently, but today is one of those days. So yeah, that's me.
So I think we have time to entertain a couple of questions. If you use the Q&A feature, we can pick up a couple. We can entertain a couple now. Maybe we'll have a couple minutes at the end to pick up any others. But Alexandra is wondering not just about the timeline in terms of weeks, but really in terms of hours. And because it's an aggregate question, production-wise and on all ends, I think we'll need to kind of have a team answer. But I would think that probably on the TA end, it's at least 24 hours, I would think, at least. Ashley, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say about that. Yeah, about 3 days of good solid work. I was going to say in the beginning, it was Jesse and I were on a call for what, 5 hours or 4 hours or something, setting up tech. So yeah, but at least 24 hours.
Longer at first too. Jesse, how about on your end?
Yeah, right now we've got it down to probably roughly about 8 to 10 hours of work per episode. It can be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on, the complexity of the episode. I think that ornamentation episode of Ashley's you saw was probably about 6 or 8 hours, but then she had another one that we probably spent, 15 or more hours on the week before. So it really does, it varies. That was the cat episode, Ashley. That one was difficult. So it really does vary. Every episode is a little bit different. But for us, I think we're very lucky that we have like a really big support system here at Lincoln Center. Not everybody has that. So there is definitely flex there. But there's a lot of work that goes into these videos for sure.
So the lesson there is make sure to leave time for your cats. You're going to include your cats. Cats make a couple cameos in a couple of these. We're at home. I'm seeing a number of questions come through about specs, and that's kind of a perfect transition. So I think what I'm going to do is move into our next segment, because I think we'll probably end up answering that as we kind of go through. I know Jesse's ready to tackle that. Ooh, hold on just a sec. Right, so we have 3 guests now. We're very excited to have guest instructors that are waiting in the Zoom wings. And I'm just going to introduce them all at first before we see them. Our first is going to be Lynn Clearfield, and she's from Louisiana. She's creating work for 2nd grade classrooms in Lafayette Parish. We're going to jump then to Mo Phillips, who's partnering with a library in Tualatin, Oregon. He's creating videos for a songwriting unit. He'll tell us more about that later. And then we'll end with Deboa Rouvier. He's a musician and a teacher in Florida who's experimenting with fusing classical music forms with hip hop. And we'll meet all of those as we go, but that's so you know what's coming up. But I'd like to welcome into the Zoom lights, Lynn Clearfield. And I think that'll be a good way to kind of, I bet we'll end up tackling some of the questions that are appearing in Q&A as we work with Lynn. So Lynn, do you want to,
Oops.
There you are. Welcome, Lynn.
Hello.
We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us about what we're seeing if we can't see it. And while you're at it, while you've got the microphone, just like what, in a nutshell, what the project is and what the goal is of the project.
Okay, sure. So I'll just explain my surroundings and myself first. I'm a white woman. I have glasses and curly brown hair and a gray streak on the top, so I'm older rather than younger. And I am sitting in our green room at the Acadiana Center for the Arts. So it's just a plain, literally kind of green room. So there's just a green wall behind me. I'm a teaching artist, as John said, in Lafayette, Louisiana for the PACE program. And that's an arts integration program. We're in the public schools and we teach kindergarten through third graders. We have visual and performing artists who teach movement, visual art, and theater. With the content curriculum, we integrate those arts with the content curriculum in English, math, social science, social studies, and science. So the class that you're going to see today is a class that was a social studies class for second graders. It's a geography content. And I guess it's a creative movement class. I'm a movement artist. And I guess the goals for me were twofold. One was just an experiential goal. I really wanted these second graders to understand the 4 parts of the globe by becoming a globe themselves in their bodies. And the 4 parts of the globe you'll see are the polar caps, the equator, lines of longitude, and lines of latitude. And the other goal was just kind of to introduce these second graders to the idea of how you can make movement from ideas and concepts we learn in school, that they could make movement out of anything they're learning to help them remember it. So that's about it.
That's great. Thank you, Lynn. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of that work. We have a short read.
Because it's a realistic model of the earth. It shows all of its land and all of its water. All right? So it also has kind of a map on the surface, as well as some more ideas and marks that help us make sense of our world. We're going to learn a lot of things today about this globe, and we're going to learn it through movement. So go ahead and stand up right behind your chair, and we'll make up something so that we know about polar caps. We could play with the word cap and pretend to put on our polar caps, right? Let's do that. So go ahead and stand up behind your chair, and let's pretend we have a North Polar cap. So put on your North Polar cap. And where would we put our South Polar cap? On our what? Our feet, right? We don't usually wear caps on our feet, but we're going to pretend today. So put on your South Polar cap. And put on your North Polar cap. And put on your South Polar cap. Okay. If the North Polar cap and the South Polar cap are the coldest parts of our planet because they're farthest from the sun, where do you think the hottest or the warmest part of our planet would be? Yeah, it's the part that is closest to the sun, right? So this big fat part of the earth is always going to be closest to the sun. And I'm noticing there's an actual line around our globe at this fattest part of the earth. Do you guys know what that's called? It's called the equator. I wonder if we could take this idea of an equator and put that into our bodies as part of our globe dance. Let's try it. So go ahead and stand up, push in your chair. Reach out, make sure you're reaching so you remember how close to the sun the equator is, right? So reaching as we turn, here we go, the other way, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how we could show our equator, right? All right, good job, you guys. Go ahead and have a seat
one more time. Longitude. We know it runs from the north all the way to the south. So go ahead and put your hands together like this. Stretch your arms up high. We're going to go north and draw that longitude line all the way to the south. Okay, good. And we know they go all the way around the earth. So turn to the side, put your arms up high, and draw them all the way down to the south. Good. Longitude. Side. Back. Ready to chat? Let's do latitude. Down and out. Down and out. Down and in.
So that just gives us a little taste. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
I think that, so I think the first thing that we'll talk about with you, the first thing we were thinking about had to do with tech. So, so I'm going to turn things over to Jesse and he'll pick it up. And I think it'll answer some of us also in the Q&A.
Great.
Hello, Lynn. Welcome.
What?
Yeah, so I am seeing a lot of these questions coming in about tech setups, you know, and I think that a lot of them actually are really applicable to your setup as well. So really briefly, right, you know, I think there's a few basic elements that you kind of want to focus on when you're putting together your videos. And Lynn, I just muted you because you had a little echo. So just so you know, when you're ready to talk, you can just unmute yourself. So yeah, so you want to think about your video, your camera, right? You know, a better camera will make a better image. You want to think about your audio as well. A lot of people have found in the, you know, the pandemic times that they've had to pick up, you know, a designated mic as well. Lighting is really important. You know, we've sent a lot of our TAs various different lighting packages to kind of help them fill out their space. You'd be really kind of shocked by how much of a difference that makes. Good lighting will make a camera look better for a lot of reasons. And then the last thing kind of in my mind is really composition and sort of mise en scène, right? The way that your space looks, where you are within the space, all of that. You know, so I'm gonna actually give just a really quick demonstration of what I mean. So here, I'm gonna share an image with you guys. So this is from a very early session that we did before we even had our logo images. This is Barbara Ellman, who's one of our really amazing TAs. You know, and you can see, right, we don't have the lighting, we don't have the camera. If we were to listen to it, you'd hear we don't quite have the audio there. Compositionally, it feels very kind of closed in. But we were able, you know, over the course of a couple of months to really implement a lot of those things. And we were able to go from this to this, which is like just worlds of difference. So Lynn, like I think that what you guys have set up in the green room that you're working in is like kind of in between those two things. You know, I think that you've got, like, particularly for your sort of close-up sections, you've got like a nice sort of composition. It looks good. You're pretty well lit for that. But I think particularly, you know, when you step back, you do kind of, it feels like you're swallowed up by that wall a little bit. So I would say, you know, if you guys can grab a couple of lights, and I'm gonna also share to the group an equipment list. So I'm sending this out to everyone. This is the equipment list that we put together for Pop-Up Classroom. So this is the working list of equipment that we sent people. This has lights on it, it has microphones. It doesn't have webcams on it just because at the time when we were working, you couldn't buy a webcam. But I would really recommend use your phone. If you have, you know, a late model smartphone, it has an amazing camera in it, which is probably going to be better than any webcam that you would buy. So particularly if you're recording segments rather than doing them live, you know, buy a tripod for $15 online on Amazon or B&H or, you know, really anywhere. Put your phone on it and use that, and it's going to look really good. There are some lighting recommendations in there. A lot of people like the ring lights, which are really good for close-ups, but I really recommend, particularly for you, you're stepping back and forth a lot, to get, there's like a 3-light package in there. That's really good. It uses these fluorescent lights, which give you a little bit more light for your money than LED lights. You know, and you can set up these 3 lights. You can have one kind of focused on you, and then you can have one on your background. If you're doing tabletop work, you can have something on your tabletop. The list that I just posted to the chat also has a little setup that we came up with for doing overhead photography. So yeah, there's a lot you can do, I think, just by kind of strategically improving your equipment. And I think for you, particularly lighting would be a really big thing, because your lessons are so warm, but your space can feel a little bit gloomy. The last the last recommendation, and then I'm going to wrap up because there's so much I know that John and Ashley want to talk to you about, is think about also in the space that you're in. When you back up, when you're all the way against the wall, you really get swallowed with it. So if you can find a way to either maybe move your camera back so that you can get the frame that you want without being all the way back against the wall, if you can put some distance there, you know, that'll actually make that wall feel kind of less imposing as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to John.
So I love how you articulated those 2 goals. Now, I have a few things that we can kind of maybe play around with the structure of the lesson. And Ashley's going to jump in with this idea of safety, because I know that when you talk to us, you kind of talk about you're partnering with schools currently. This is going into a school. You can't be in the school yourself. And so whenever you're working with partners, it's a negotiation between your ideas and their comfort zone. And I know that's in play. So with all of these ideas, you know, I've got some that really go right towards your goal as they are, some that might push the envelope. You'll just take or leave, you know, use what's useful. We know that everything that we suggest is mediated by the partnership. So first of all, you stated 2 goals. One was mnemonic and one was about choice making. And I think that the goal to mnemonics is pretty close. That is to say, through movement, these students are likely to remember and recall, if asked, what longitude versus latitude is and where a cap is. Now, I think that there are a couple things. Let's just talk about that goal in and of itself. I think that there are a couple things you could do to just, if that was the goal, to just drive it home. And that would have to do, I do think that if there was some way to create globe visuals while you were dancing, so we could see the globe next to you and maybe see the line on the globe, it would just kind of hammer home in a sense, like we're doing this here. And that would keep you from having to say, sit down, you know, tell them to sit down and then get up and then move and then sit down, which with my experience with 2nd graders is also kind of phrase at attention. So it's almost like keeping them up the whole time and consolidating the lesson, if that's the goal. And then I would, so we're kind of matching the things that they do with visuals. If you really wanted to go for that, you could even have them, you're already doing it some, like saying the thing as they do it, longitude rather than 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, then we'll really make sure that this is like, remember what this is, if that's the goal. If that is the goal, I think you could take all of the things that you do that you you don't have a chance to make movement about out of the lesson because they aren't supported by activity. So if that's the goal, you talk about north and south, but we never do anything with that. We talk about the proximity of the sun, but we don't have any physical decision-making point of reference for it. So it's almost like, well, take that out and let it be a short lesson that meets that mnemonic goal, or put it in and include it in the choice making. And so now what I'm excited to do is get to that second goal, which I think we can do some work on, which is how can I leave them with the idea they can make movement from what they learn? But before I do that, I want to kind of circle back around to the environment, because I know that safety is a concern, that the teachers, first of all, want social distancing, and they also want, there also may be discussions about, you know, to what extent can they interact, to what extent can the motion be big and quick. So Ashley, I know that you had some thoughts about that, so I'm going to turn safety over to you.
Yeah, and we actually won't spend a ton of time on it because I think this work that you're about to do will get at it. And John was already sort of talking about how to sort of do those instructions by sort of doing them. And so even when we were talking before, I thought, oh, well, this is a really great opportunity to sort of model safety. And even you can see it in some of the other, especially Deb uses it in her work, which is when you want to think about distance, if you have something physically there to sort of create distance with, then that sort of does that a little bit of that work for you. So if you have a chair, I know that you have a chair in your video. So if you're using the chair and sort of moving around the chair and acknowledging that it's there, and that I'm going to keep that space away around it, then it sort of like raises that idea of spatial awareness and gives something that is a very physical, literal representation of what you're saying, and gives your students like a visual point of reference. So yeah, when you're thinking about things like that, modeling safe movement, using sort of like those other physical elements, modeling distance by using that same sort of, that same idea. And let's see, I think that's it, because I think you're going to hit on the rest of these things with John, but really just that idea of using modeling to sort of replace some of that repetitive, sit down, stand behind your chair, and all of those things that will become moving it more into this digital thing than feeling like you're in the classroom with them. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in again, and of course, because we're live, what I talked about before is happening a little bit. If flag me. If I start to break up, I'm getting an internet unstable. Spectrum is failing me a little bit. But can everybody hear me okay for now?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go on. So let's talk about that other goal. I think that what I'd love to do is imagine that we could do more. And, you know, Lynn, is there an asynchronous component to your work with this school? Like, is there an asynchronous component to the school day? Do they do things at home?
No. All of our kids, kindergarten through 5th, are in school 5 days a week, face to face. Nothing at home. They're not hybrid.
Okay. Very different.
But we do have, I mean, we also put our lessons out to the community. So there are plenty of kids who are not in school who have access to our lessons.
Great. So we might also think about, well, if this were, my colleague Dan calls it kind of medium agnostic. If we designed it so that it could be in there, but it could be anywhere, you could kind of multi-purpose it, then we can begin to play with, as I would love to, what dance goal could there be? Because I think to get to your goal about movement, we have to think about not just what do we want them to remember about the globe, but what kind of movement concepts would we like them to take away from this? Yeah. And I think that in order to take those away, they have to make choices with them some way or another. Right. So I'm thinking about some, I'm curious, the ones that I see, but I'm curious to know, since you're the dance expert, what you're interested in. You know, I see possibilities for extension, for level work, maybe shape work? Is there a particular dance element that you feel like, yeah, you'd be interested to kind of play around with? Levels?
We definitely have all of those integrated in our lessons. This particular lesson, the original concept as far as a dance concept was just a contrast in speed and a little bit of rhythm work. And in the making of the video, that stuff kind of got pulled out a little bit. So the idea was to have it in there, and there wasn't time.
And is it fast or slow movement in orbit?
Well, the idea, yes. I mean, it's still in there, but I'm just not consciously verbalizing it to the students as in you have a choice. Like, okay, we can do this equator movement. Do you want to do it fast or do you want to do it slow? What's fun for you? Like, I didn't get to sort of include that in the class, but that was the original idea.
Great. So maybe that's something. And it's interesting to think about what's the most, purposeful thing to do. I mean, we could, if you're really interested in the idea of the shape of the globe, then maybe body extension and giving them a choice of not just with their hand, but how to fill the narrow space at a high level with their body. And they can choose what it's going to be. How can you extend your body wide? We know the middle. What parts of your body can you extend? Now, of course, with asynchronous, you can't say, what idea do you have? What you can't get the feedback, but what you can do is we can see you making a choice between we can see if we realize you're playing with different options. I could use my hips, I could use my elbow. Oh, maybe I could use my head or my feet. Then that'll cue them to the fact that they have agency in possibility in that moment. So so let's run with, so maybe we could potentially play with that one. I mean, there's also the possibility of proximity if you really wanted to do the sun, and maybe these become separate lessons, right? Now, so maybe how would we do it? Well, do you want to show us a little bit of what we could either do that one, or we could tell me a little bit more about what the instruction was around fast and slow.
I have to remember back. I think it was just, there was just more like playing with it at the beginning of class. So in the warm up, there was, doing everything fast and slow and just playing with it and seeing how it affected the experience differently and the visual experience of someone watching you also.
Great. The warm up is a great place to kind of establish also that they have choices. So, well, I guess we don't have time to play with it now, but if we did, that would be an interesting thing to play with.
Yeah.
And then we could also kind of play with, again, you can kind of model if you have a chair, like if they're concerned about space, like, oh, and I will remember, you, the teaching artist, oh, that's right, I'll remember, don't go so fast I run into the chair. Or I remember, I'm not going to get too close to you. We have to keep 6 feet apart from you. Things like that you can model.
Yeah.
Do you have any quick questions? About that?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think I love when I'm in class, I'm always giving students choices, but somehow this changing to video made that, because there's no interaction.
Yeah.
Right. We're not even able to use chat. So there's nothing. Like, I'm just into the void, putting everything out there. So I think some of that kind of got left behind, but I very much think it's valuable and I want to have that back in the lesson. So those are some good options. I guess I feel like if students see me doing 3 different options, they may just choose one of mine, but I'm hoping that they make up their own, but you just don't have control over that. So
you don't, but the more they see you making choices, the more I think that they'll be aware that they can.
Yeah.
I think that's where we can take, like you say, that's where the medium and our usual work can meet.
Yeah.
You're constantly inviting them, and you're constantly talking to them on the assumption that they are making choices. I wonder what you're doing while I'm doing it, kind of a thing. Thank you so much, Lynn. That was great to see and really fun to work on with you.
Well, thank you. It was great working with you.
So I'm going to, I will switch over now.
Okay.
And I think next up we have Mo. Do you want to come in and join us?
Hello.
Hello, Mo.
Hi. How's it going?
It's going great. So
Great.
Mo, let's do the same thing. We'll just do it all in one fell swoop. If you want to introduce yourself, give us a little description, and give us a quick nutshell of the goal and the project.
Absolutely. My name is Mo Phillips. I'm a white middle-aged fella with a beard that's going gray, and I'm not going to blame it on my children. And I have a blue cardigan on with a black shirt, and I'm in my basement hovel that actually has a nice window because we made it so it's an office that's white with some Christmas lights and some occasional lamps, and a generally cozy feel. And we're going to be showing and talking about a series I made specifically for Tualatin Library out here in Oregon. Tualatin's a lovely suburb of Portland, but the project itself is supposed to be generally available to libraries and then schools as well. In Portland, I'm a teaching artist with the Right Brain Initiative and young audiences, and have been for many years. And this project is essentially a truncated amalgamation of my songwriting residency I do in schools. It is a 3-video series that ending in a 4th session that is a Zoom call to talk to kiddos that have worked on this series. Like anyone who's engaged with it and has created something, then on the 4th call, we're going to hang out and talk about that. So there's a lot from my residency, my main residency in here, but it's also a total nightmare trying to convert that classroom into a video.
Well, it's pretty fun to see the results. So let's actually share a little bit of that with everybody. So we've got some samplings of Mo's work.
Great.
And we'll turn to that.
Sorry, that's me. I got distracted with the Q&A.
Hello, my name is Mo Phillips. Welcome to my songwriting little session situation. This is a program designed to talk about and then make songs. Okay, that sounds cool. Before we get too into it, why don't I play you a video of a song I made with my good buddy Dean? And that way you can decide whether I even know what I'm talking about. Do I know what a song is? I'm gonna open up a donut shop with so many flavors, so many flavors. I'm gonna open up a donut. So, let's start with the first thing. A song is something you put on your foot so your foot doesn't get hurt when you're walking down the road. No, it's not. That's not what a song is. What is a song? Yes, that's right. A song is music. It's stuff that goes into your ears and tickles your brain and makes your brain go, woo, I think I want to dance. Or, woo, I feel terrible and I'm sad. But you might be saying, Mo, what's music? What's music? What else can make a pattern of sounds? What about a train? Choo-choo, 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 choo-choo. Just a pattern of sounds. This and this and this and this and this. Those sounds, can you have a pattern of sounds between, say, a train and a bird? Or a bird and a train? Sure. Why not? I mean, come on. That's a hit. In Madagascar. I released that song in Madagascar a couple years ago. That's not true. I didn't do that either. Forget about it. Forget about it. So, patterns of sound. That's music, which is pretty simple. Like in the end, that's what it is. So right now, you're gonna make some music by making a sound and repeating it in a pattern, or making two sounds and repeating them in a pattern. Maybe your pattern is something like boop, 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 or maybe it's boop, boop, boop. I don't know what your pattern is. I'm gonna listen. I'll wait. Go. That's a good pattern. That was really good. You were making music right there. It's awesome. We have more and more layers called the elements of music that make up songs. Let's talk about some of those elements of music, shall we? You got pitch and tempo and dynamics, all important elements of music. Not something we need to stress out about, but something to consider as you start to make a song. How loud is my song gonna be? And what does that make me feel? Or how loud, or turn it down, please. Turn it down, please. We're in the library. We turn it down just a little bit. Turn it down. Or how fast is it gonna be? How fast is it gonna be? How fast is it gonna be? Am I gonna sing it like this? Am I sing it like this? You know, the lyrics are those words. So you might have anything you want to say. I don't know what you want to say. Do you want to say, my shoes don't fit? Give me new shoes. Okay, cool. You're going to want to add a melody. But what's the melody? The melody is the way the tune travels, right? I don't like the way my shoes fit. I just made that up. I don't like the way my shoes fit. I don't like the way my shoes fit. I don't like the way my shoes fit. Someone give me some new ones. I don't know what I'm talking about. So, you're taking a melody and putting it to some words. I don't like the way my shoes fit. That's it. That's song making. I mean, that's a hit, right? Just like the other songs we made were super hits.
Super hits.
Super hits. Super hits. Super goofball.
Yeah, that is certainly a great example of fun. So, you know, we were talking before, graphic wise, you're modeling a lot that I think is really interesting for folks to see. I mean, this is the vocabulary. You kind of go further than we do in terms of the, you know, really embracing the vocabulary that people online are acclimated to. That's kind of the vernacular of the web. And so we don't really, I don't have any notes on that. I think it's super effective. But we had some things that we thought we could play with, and this is really, really subtle stuff. But because you're at a place, I think with it, it might be interesting too. And the first one is that persona idea, and it's one of the reasons why I was interested in having, like, for instance, Deb's work. Deb was the TA who was doing the dance of the opposites, the fast and the slow, in that collage, and I want to say a little bit more about that with her work, because she has her persona is, remember that balance we talked about, is more performative. But one of the things that makes her episodes effective is that when she is, the close space is earnest and intimate. So when she's in, she's really connecting with the people who were there. And then when she's a little broader, then she's back mid-range or far range. So one of the things that I think, again, this is subtle stuff. It's little tiny, teeny touches.
That's awesome.
It's polished, but for instance, in your video, you've got on glasses so we can't see your eyes when you're really, really close. And you're in a really strong character.
Right.
And then the interesting thing is, I think the first glimpse I see of the really earnest, like, you know, oh, you're my neighbor, Mo, is in the donut shop. So what I would, if you're game to just try it, what I'd love is some improvised version of the top. Are you willing to give it a shot?
Oh yeah, of course.
You have those sunglasses?
Yes.
And incidentally, like happy mistakes, like the moment when you try to put them in your pocket and they fall on the ground, that's what we're talking about. That's an example of it. Right?
That's a classic move.
It's well, yeah, it's all right. We'll trademark it, and you'll get a little 5 cents every time we do it.
Oh no, that's my
I'm
move.
joking.
You're gonna have to pay me.
That's what I'm saying. I'm joking. So just this is a subtle thing, but just improvise your way through the beginning. But instead of the glasses being like on and when you're close, have the close mode be, hey, I'm really connecting with you. Hi.
Right. Oh God, I love that.
Because again, we're not going into their room.
Right.
They're coming into us. So it's like sitting down to somebody who's a foot away from you. And then you can play with the glasses when you go back. So if you have the impulse to do something big or bigger, just, I don't know, just make it up. I know.
I get it. I love it.
See what that's like. So when you're close, the glasses are off.
Hello. Are you there? You are? That's great. I'm here too. It's me. It's your buddy Mo. It's great to see you. Are we going to do this today? We are? Okay, let's get ready. It's time party!
Right. That's exactly it.
Right. Oh, that makes so much sense. I love the idea of like the intimacy, like you're making that connection when you're in tight. Like that makes a ton of sense. I love that.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Ashley came up with this great analogy that they're like, there's a spectrum between Mr. Rogers and Bill Nye.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting.
And they work. It's not like the other character. Bill Nye totally works.
Right.
But you can modulate a little bit. Like when you're close, it's a little bit more Mr. Rogers time. And again, for each TA, it's different. And the Bill Nye part, the Bill Nye and you, or whatever, the bigger thing can come out at more of a distance.
That's
great.
Cool.
That was the opening part. So Ashley, do you want to talk about chunks or that opening hook?
Yes. Mo, we're
chunks.
here. Mo came up with this chunkifying. So Mo, let me tell you, as I was watching just that one clip, I wrote down 5 different lessons that could come out of this one.
Yeah, thank you.
This one little clip, right?
Okay,
so
great.
You have patterns. That's a whole lesson.
That's a whole lesson.
Patterns is a whole lesson. The elements of music. That's like a whole thing. You have used the word phrasing. Yeah. Phrasing is a lesson in and of itself. Melody and lyrics. You could spend a whole lesson on melody, a whole lesson on lyrics, or put them together. I think one of the key things will be for you, because you're a songwriter and because this is your art, is to think about your process in your art. And so when you are approaching these things, all of these things are in play, and it's okay. I think one thing that we have to realize in these spaces is it's okay to not mention everything at one time.
Right.
And that's kind of like, the facts of life. We know that there's always multiple things working in the background, but what are the key manipulative tools that I want to introduce? And we just want to play with these few little tools today to make this one thing.
Right.
So if you walk away with a real sense of melody, then I've done a process that I enjoy, and I've taken you through that. So really, to think about process as an artist will help you chunkify that, and so that you can get this. It's still that word, that magic word that TAs like to use, scaffolding. That you're still building something, and you still were doing it, but it was more like just sort of an overview. So if you did this sort of purposefully as an overview, I wouldn't go into any kind of making, not too much. But I mean, I don't think you have to. I think you can start with one thing. What's the first thing? And I'll ask you, if you want to do something around songwriting, what's the first thing that you do when you're approaching songwriting? What's the first thing you do?
Right. My general practice is on guitar, ukulele, or sometimes piano, is to work with chords. So my usual process is starting with just getting some sounds going, and then melodicizing over them with like jibber jabber, and then syllables and sounds. So that's my starting point.
So chords is a big idea.
It's
and
huge.
It's a valid idea to teach about, though. Like, this is sky's the limit. This is fun world. You teach about anything you want to teach about.
Right.
So how do you, and we want to think, this is why we use this word facilitator, the idea of making ease something and making something that seems very complex become very tangible and very feeling doable in its most sort of basic sense. So how do you take the concept of chords?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one of my big battles is how do I get kids to melodicize just with their voices, and not be turned off by the fact that I'm a good guitar player because I've been doing it for 30 years or whatever.
I think that welcomes them in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I might jump in here because it's something that was a fascinating discovery on video that I think is more powerful. In a classroom, if Ashley stands in a circle and says, let's sing a song, I'll go first. And she lets loose like you heard her sing. And then she says, okay, now it's your turn. The kids are going to be, it would be scary. But on the other side of the screen, it's not scary. We're finding actually the TAs can share their full-on artistry, and it does not diminish the willingness or intimidate the people on the other side of the screen to participate.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier about, showing our process. And I think, and even before we got to the workshop section, but showing it, what it is that we do as a way of demonstrating just how it works. So that then gives me the confidence to be like, okay, this is how I do it. And whoever's watching this wants to know how I do it. So I'm demonstrating how I get it done. And hopefully they'll be inspired to then carry on from there and in their way.
I think in this sort of space, people want to know that they're in good hands. So it's okay. It's totally okay for you to sort of let your light shine. It's okay to, but it's okay to sort of let your artistry guide people along. You're on this side, you don't have that sort of like one-on-one with them. So they want to know that you're sure in your artistry. And these are things that you're choosing that you're sure about because they live within you. And so you're just saying, hey, I have this really cool thing that I love and I love to do it. And I want to show you how I do it. And maybe in this process of me showing you how I do it, you can come up with your own process of how you do it. So
I love that.
That's that, and we didn't talk about it as much in Lynn's, but there's also the thinking out loud, like giving time. So you go deeper. If you decide to distill down and choose one sort of musical concept that you want to focus on, and then you go deeper into that concept, there are going to be elements and tools that all sort of create that thing. Like we can always break a thing down to another thing, and what creates this. So
I might jump in there in just a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
No, you finish it, and then I'll jump in.
Go ahead. I think I was going to ramble, but go ahead.
Well, there are a couple of things that just to build up. First of all, Ashley, it was a great answer to a question that I'm seeing in the chat about TA process and drawing from TA process, what you just said.
Yeah.
And then I would also say another way to think about what chunks? When I think about yours, Ashley, it makes me think, well, choose a chunk where at the end of the episode, they have made one thing.
Yeah.
They've made something with the thing. So for instance, the first time Ashley did ornaments, you reminded me of this, Mo. She had a melody that they were singing. She gave the melody that was pre-cooked.
Right.
She didn't use words, just to your point. It was ba 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 da ba 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 da ba, right?
Right.
Because we're not going to do lyrics today. But she did make adjustments, ornamental adjustments to the melody. And then at the end, there was a sing-along where everybody sang the ornaments that they had chosen within that song. So the chunk was ornaments, everything else is set, but there's still a clear, I've made something at the end with ornaments, and now I can share it. And you said something also, Ashley, I just want to jump on about trust. And this is, again, it's a tiny, subtle note, but because you're so strong in presentation, I feel like we can share it. It's super subtle, but two little tiny subtle things. And one is when you make the jokes, it's a very, very fine line between kind of the teasing and deceiving. And I feel like you're on that line just fine when the shoe drops and you say, "No, that's not what it is."
Yeah.
Mr. B does this sometimes, like, you're going to need a yoga mat for what we're going to do. And no, you're not, and it's just like, I'm joking, but we're all in on the joke. It's very subtle, different than saying things that undercut you, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Or don't listen to me. Things like that. So make the jokes where they're in on the tease, but you're not undercutting yourself or troubling their sense of trust in you.
So valid. Yes, thank you for sure.
And then, so that was my one thought. And then I have one other thing, and that is
the hook too, John.
Oh, the hook. You hit the hook, and then we'll stop with the hook.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying in the video that you want to like show people, what you're doing. And I think that's probably just an editing thing too. Like maybe even starting the video with the thing that you want to sort of like, you're already kind of hooking them in, like, oh, we're going to do something in with this. Because you have this really sort of engaging thing that you don't have to set aside time for once you've already launched into your lesson. It's like, it's almost like a point of reference to go back to. Oh, that thing that you saw, I was doing yada yada yada. And so it accomplishes that goal for you of sort of like putting your credentials out there. But also hooking people in. What are you saying?
And I think it was at the top of your one of the slides you guys had mentioned in that there's like the intro, and then there's like, this is how I do it kind of thing. I can't quite remember it, but yeah, I like that idea of hello, and then boom, this is what I've got going on, and they're like, oh sweet, this looks fun, and then into the lesson. Yeah,
it's a hook, cool. Because editing is such a huge part of it's a part of the teaching artistry at this point, because your videos are so purposefully UDL like they really are. So it becomes a part of the teaching to think about how you can use editing to support the teaching in that way.
Yeah, that hook thing, it's so subtle and goes so quick in sentences you almost don't see it. Like the masks behind Barbara tell you that she's good at making masks. This opening that Jeffrey has of just like, hello everybody, hello everybody, hello everybody. I already know that he knows how to make different opening moments. So it can be it can be grab and it can be quick.
Totally. Oh, I love that. Awesome. You guys are great. This is cool.
Well, do you feel like we got to this chunk, or do you have more questions about?
No, you guys gave me so much to think about and work on, and hopefully we'll figure this out, how to get more videos to more schools and more libraries and whoever else needs them, so that I can keep making more. I guess I just got to make them and hope somebody finds them. But this is great. This has been awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing your work with us, Mo. It was really fun to see and really fun to work with you.
Thank you, guys.
You betcha.
It's amazing.
So I'm going to welcome up our final guest instructor, and that's Reboa.
Reboa.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, how are you?
Hello, welcome. So I guess you kind of know the number now. If you want to introduce yourself, describe your setting, and give us just a real quick nutshell of your goal and what you're up to, and then we'll take a look at it.
Sure, that sounds great. Hello, my name is Debo Wah. I am a Black male who was born and raised in the United States of America. I am sitting in my bedroom, and behind me is a picture that I painted of my rendition of Starry Night, which I call junk art. It's just recycled art that I paint over. So that's one of my hobbies that I like to enjoy. My project is a transcendental music concept that takes hip hop and mixes it with the classical Western canon. I'm attempting to develop a music curriculum that's can be for all age groups, not to be an ableist in those terms, because it does require you to use technology and to use your hands to use GarageBand, but for those who are able to do that. So it's a beat making curriculum, and we take different classical composers from all around the world, and we analyze their music, their theory, and their life, their lived experiences. And then we take those experiences musically and socially to create a beat from their music that's of our own creation. So it's about mixing their styles with our own concepts.
Thank you. Great, Debo. Let's take a look at some of your work.
I'm working on it. My computer's a little cranky.
Problem.
Today's lesson will sample the work of William Grant Still, Grief, Our Weeping Angel, which is a piece for tenor voice and piano. William Grant Still, Jr. is considered by many to be the dean of African American composers. He was born in Woodville, Mississippi on May 11, 1895. His father, William Grant Still Sr., was a musician who once taught music at Alabama A&M College. While this may not get you cooking in the kitchen, I assure you we can make this very trappy. I have to say I could trap to this without any spices, but let's go ahead and spice it up. I'm going to start with just the first 8 measures of the piece, from measures 1 through 8. At another time, we will review the entire opener, the entire piece. But let's go ahead and take a listen to just the sample selection at this time. You may notice that I have included harmonic dictation and chords along with the sample. That is for you to play along with at your own time, at your leisure, or if you would like to create your own beat, please feel free to freeze frame and copy the progression for yourself. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that now. Composition will be based on the exact chord progression that William Grant Still uses, except for there's no add 4 in GarageBand, so I won't be able to use that in the G sharp minor 7 add 4 chord. But other than that, I'm going to stick to what he provided, and I think this piece will make one scrumptious hip-hop beat. I'm really excited to get to work on it. I just cannot wait. So let's go ahead and get started. Let us and Tomato get to work creating the backing beat for our melody. Okay, so for the first section, I actually ended up starting with the bass line and working on developing the progression through just creating my own ostinati and not using any of the pre-composed autoplays. And you're just going to see me walk myself through that at this time. So go ahead and take a look at that. Actually view it. And it was very interesting. It just really fit really well with the track and what was already composed. So I thought that it was really nice, and it really complemented what was occurring in the music. So let's go ahead and just take a listen. Oh, how would you go about creating a beat off of Weeping Angel or Grief? How would you go about creating a beat? Go ahead and leave me a comment below, or email me at debowrouvier@gmail.com.
Great. Ashley, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Debois. First of all, I love this. I love the goal that you're working on and and getting at. There's a couple of things that I want to know before we launch into this. Is there since you're building this, is there any type of foundational video or session that exists before this, or is this sort of the start of the process?
No, it's the start of the process. In terms of the actual composition, like how to develop a composition or how to develop a beat, no, I don't have any videos on that.
Okay. So let me ask you that. If you were to start there, what would be the key sort of musical ideas a participant could explore to get into how to start a composition and develop a beat? What would be the musical, outside of GarageBand, the musical ideas you would want them to think about?
Well, the musical ideas I would want any student to think about when composing is like first starting with steady beat, then understanding like contour, understanding melody, understanding chords. You're not necessarily having to have like a comprehensive understanding of theory, but just understanding like the basics of chords. When I was in Venezuela, I taught IB music. And so that's kind of where I started this project, was there. So it actually is kind of like the end result of that. So it was like, teaching my elementary students what's a melody, what's contour, and then developing them. We would listen to pop music, we would analyze it, what's a chorus, what's a verse, and then we would listen to a pop song, and then they would have to tell me, oh, this is an introduction, or is it the first verse? And we would analyze music that way. So I think I just kind of like bypassed all the stuff that I've already done in my like lived experiences teaching and just started with the end result.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I would love to, I think that this video is a great sort of way, it's a great point once you've gotten some of that other information sort of flowing. But I'm also curious, in this video, even in using GarageBand, if there's a way to sort of establish those understandings before you launch into the software.
Yes. I don't know if it would necessarily, I think what my struggle would be is trying to formulate a way of putting it in where it's like I'm already over, like my goal was to go no longer than 25 minutes, but because I use full examples, like I did a Florence Price, I used her full first movement symphony, so that pushed her lesson plan to 44 minutes. So I'm like struggling with balancing putting the history of the composer, putting in the listening, putting in a theory analysis, and then the creation process. So I think I'm just kind of, I think that it would have to exist independently as opposed to, or maybe I could try to find ways to bridge it in and still stay within a time frame that is comfortable or manageable.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, a great point, is that like one of the things that is so powerful about using like, YouTube, for example, is that you can hyperlink, you can reference things that are elsewhere. So like I think like it offers you actually exactly what you want, which is the ability to have this streamlined lesson and then to be able to put in those little buttons, that say, if you want to jump out and look at, this basic, this foundational piece here or this foundational piece, you can jump out and jump back in. So I would say, maybe think about like creating the scaffolding in a way where it's like footnotes essentially, right? You've got your lesson, but they're, to make it accessible to people who aren't going to come in with this like high level knowledge, you can link them to whatever. It doesn't even have to be your work, right? If there's stuff out there, like if there's a concise explainer of what melody is, you can just say, check that out here. It's a button in YouTube on your screen. They click it, they go, and then when they're done, they can come back. Like I would say, kind of think about building in some of that interactivity that'll be really helpful for people who are less advanced.
Okay. That sounds great.
Yeah. Yes. Like those are options. If you did that, I wonder though in the video if you would have to sort of prompt that. Like in order to get into this, check that out first. Or is there a way to I would love to see, first of all, we were talking about the fact that we would love to see you.
Oh yeah.
Video. Because this idea of persona, you yourself are an interesting person. And so it helps to, even if you sort of disappear back behind the garage band, to have a point of reference and who's guiding us. And Jesse and I were talking about, Jesse and I played with OBS a lot in those early Facebook, the pop-up classroom iterations, because it gave us the opportunity to sort of share the screen that we wanted people to see and be interacting on, but also I got to exist in a little tiny camera box on the screen, but you're editing. So you could sort of play with it that way and just sort of edit yourself in. I just think it's important for you to be seen. The other question that I have is, I totally honor the contextual information. I honor why you're using it. I honor that it's this idea about representation and about all of these really important things. But I wonder how you can sort of make it a little bit more concise, even if that's you, even if that's you saying, hey, I want to tell you a story or something like that, so that we see you in that, we see that this William Grant Still excites you, the story of William Grant Still excites you, but you tell it in a much more like, if you're going to use context, it needs to grab.
Right.
I mean,
I had an idea to do spoken words. And so like I have one here like for my JS Bach one, but I just haven't gotten around to doing that, because like I'm like creating and posting so quickly. So it's kind of like, I feel like I would rather get content out there, but when you're like sitting there having to write a spoken word, that takes a moment to like decompress and really think about what you want to say, versus if you're writing like, a historical research paper, which takes you like 20 minutes to do.
Right.
If I can jump in.
Yeah, please.
And just kind of build, I think, this is, again, based on pop-up, one takeaway might be that I think the thing that's going to hook them, I think that if your goal is ultimately that your viewers draw on their lived lives for the pieces that they make, the thing that's going to get them is going to be the choice making that they make. When they see, again, it's that kind of activating, taking what you're doing and shifting the chemistry of it so that it's a little bit less about look what I made, and the hook will be less. It's almost like the fact that William Grant Still drew on his lived life is fuel for the fundamental, the engine, the fact that your participants are going to draw on their lived life to make something alongside you. And so what I'd be interested in is kind of, and I'll throw it back over to Ashley to kind of talk about how we can activate that art making. But one thing that I notice is that you have moments where you invite, like at the end, there's an invitation, like, I wonder how you might do this. But kind of pulling that throughout, like how does the whole thing, that invitation comes earlier and things build to it, number one. And number two, there's an interesting thing you do where you when you're about to go in, you're in present tense. You say like, I'm going to go in, my software and I are going to do this. And then we arrive there and you move to past tense. Well, so here's what I did. I did this thing already. I'm going to show you what I did. Now we have to have some stuff, like you say, you got 25 minutes. So some stuff is, pre-cooked like a cooking show. You're pulling out the crust. It's already made. But what's the thing, and here's where I'll turn it back over to Ashley. What's the thing that we really watch you make in the moment? Like, I'm doing this right now in front of you and you're hearing me do it, because that's going to be the in for other people to make rather than just appreciate what you made. But Ashley, why don't you?
I mean, no, that's it, David. I think it's, the first question was, what do I need to know in order to participate? But then what is it that we are, what are we doing? What makes trap trappy? And I know that there is this sort of, well, we just know that it's got those, you know, those kind of like triplet kind of feel sometimes to it, or it has those things to it. But how cool would it be to actually take, I mean, because we are thinking about like legitimizing musical forms that are already, they're popular and they're being embraced, and we're trying to move them into these sort of like putting them adjacent to these other musical forms that have been legitimized already. So what is it that makes trap? What are the musical elements that make trap? So when you go into your choice making, how can someone alongside with you, whether they're watching the video or they're right there in GarageBand with you, what are the musical decisions that they're making in GarageBand? So that when they click on the beat maker, you know, when they click on that screen, they have a little bit more information than I like or I don't like, but I'm looking for, or I'm going after. Because the really cool thing about your work is that it's technology based, which means there are some unique opportunities to make choices in there. So I think that if you can do a little bit of thinking about how to just pull out a couple of musical elements that we're going to play with in trap.
Okay.
Whatever, a rhythm or whatever it is, and we're going to play with that. And we're going to use GarageBand to play with those elements.
Got you.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that, yeah, that'll give you that sense of ownership and establishing your, because then you're letting people, I love the question that you say, like, how would you go about doing this? So you can sort of be asking them along the way of you making those decisions. How would you do this? Would you choose create a different pattern, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Is there, when you were making that yourself, is there one moment that you can recall when you chose between two different things? I mean, I know it was a while ago. Was there something you deliberated about? Like, oh, it could be this or it could be that?
No, it's like such a in the zone process. I just kind of just tap whatever I feel like is going to sound good and just go with that. Like, I try not to put too much thought process into the actual beat making experience. So I think like when it comes to like deciding between like sounds, I'll go, oh yeah, you're right. Like I'll say like, you know, I might play like a guitar sound and say like, oh no, and then switch it. But it's not like something that I'm like deeply thinking about, like where it's like, it feels like I'm making a decision.
But even that, the beauty is like even quick decisions, you know, your instincts, your experience is such that even your quick decisions are informed. So even just that, like, oh, there's that guitar, that sounds good. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, like seeing you decide between. And then if you can give just a little color as to why, like for instance, if you chose between, what is it that might be appealing about one GarageBand sound versus another?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like, can you think of one right now that, this is so tough because we're not listening to them, but you know them pretty well. Is there one that you found sometimes works and sometimes doesn't?
If you're like in the synthesizers and you're on autoplay 4 with the like bass element, like the bass sounds of synthesizers, like that one is so, it's very abrasive and it's like pungent. So it's gonna just shoot out of any composition you use. So like I did an example with EDM. So it was great for that. But then, you know, when you try to put it into any other type of like beat making sound, it's just like, oh, too heavy.
That's great. That's the stuff. That's, I feel like kind of
the whole process. You could have
just
talked
said.
through with someone.
What you just said is talking the process. That's the episode. And if I see you doing that, then I'll know. And how interesting. That's how I feel about cilantro. It's like some things you put cilantro in and it's just like, oh, now that just tastes like cilantro.
Right.
You know, but every once in a while it's okay. So to see you talk about those qualities and be in that decision, I think that that's going to make, that's not only going to engage people more, it's going to cue people how to pull on their lived experiences even more than hearing the full-fleshed story of William Grant Still. Not that it's critical that we don't have that, but I think the real critical ingredient is what you just did. That speaking you just did, that's the stuff.
That's identifying that goal of you wanting them to identify their own voice, their own concepts, is you sort of giving them the tools to explore that and to find their identity in that, or identifying within that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Question?
Thank you so much,
I know we're
Debra.
almost over. I don't know if you want to ask a question.
No, it's just well, one about the bios. Do you think that it would be a good idea to put those, to start using those spoken words as opposed to keeping it just like how I have it now, which is those kind of written bios?
Will it do you feel like it would service the art making that you're trying to get to?
Yeah, I think so, because, you know, it has rhythm and it has beat to it. And also it's like, you know, in relation to rap, it's very close. So with that regard, I think it kind of is on trend with what I'm trying to create artistically.
Especially if you did it in a trappy way, because then
Right.
you break that down and then it's all connected and nothing
Modeling
is
it.
sort of standing alone on its own. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That's great. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Deboa.
Yes, thank you.
It was really fun to work with you, and excited about that. I'm excited to see the next episode that comes.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who is here. The last note that Ashley, thank you. Jesse, thank you.
Thank you.
I learned a lot even just listening to you work. I just want to say to everybody that, you know, this is like a master class, but we aren't the masters. We've been doing it for 8 months, and I can tell from the comments and chats, you have amazing ideas. So please, we have a Facebook site for Activate. Go there and share what you're discovering, share what you find, you learn from your audiences. The more we crowdsource, the better we'll all be. So I'm excited to learn a little bit about what you've tried and what you've learned back on our Facebook site. If you travel there, our Activate site. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Laurel, who's going to give us a final note and a final farewell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And thank you to all of our facilitators and all of our guest speakers. It was a great workshop and conversation. And as John said, make sure to join our Facebook group so you can continue posing questions, connect with one another, and just continue the conversation. So a quick reminder that we have some upcoming Fall Activate events. Thinking Inclusive Design on Tuesday, October 27th at 4 p.m. and Exploring Learner Engagement through Online Platforms on Tuesday, November 17th at 6 p.m. The link to learn more and register is in the chat. And finally, enjoy Hope Boykin's Inspiring Activate keynote from this past July. The link is also in the chat. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon.